Everything that we do has an impact on our environment, from the clothes we wear to the plate that we eat on, and even the car that we drive. Hello and welcome, I'm Sadhika Tiwari and you are watching Eco India. And if our choices have consequences, then there must also be sustainable alternates to our usuals. And that's what this episode is all about. Eating in plates made out of leaves is an age-old Indian tradition. But now, they can only be found in very, very few places. Because plastic, despite all its evils, has crept in everywhere. But people from Himachal Pradesh, a North Indian mountain state, are going back to their roots.
It's a process that for them has become so second nature, it takes no time at all. Baburam and his wife and daughter are making pattals or eating plates out of tor leaves.
When we eat on plastic plates and serve hot food, these plates become smelly. But when we use these tor plates that are naturally available, it satisfies the soul.
We are in the mountains of Himachal Pradesh. It's a hot spot of biodiversity, but nature here has long come under threat. 13,000 tons of plastic waste accumulate here every year and take decades to decompose in the landfills. In 2022, the state government imposed a ban on single-use plastics. Since then, people here have been turning to tor leaves as a substitute. They are especially in demand at community celebrations. Here in the western Himalayas, conditions for tor or orchid plant are perfect. It feels right at home at altitudes of 2 to 4,000 feet.
So its leaves are huge and smooth, and that's why we use its leaves for making pattals. And it's a multi-purpose plant. Along with food and fiber, it's a source of fuel and cattle fodder.
Medicine, etc.
The traditional way of making pattals is laborious. 3 to 5 leaves are needed for one plate and they are sewn together with thin bamboo needles. Since 2016, a machine has made the work easier. A women's self-help group financed it with donations from the business community. Today, about 20 families use the machine, earning some 400,000 rupees a month, the equivalent of around 230 euros per family.
These pattals have a shelf life of 3 to 5 days, after which they develop a fungus. When these leaves are dry pressed, the great advantage is they lose moisture and can be stored for 6 months.
It can be stored for 6 months.
The family of 35-year-old Padmavati have been producing pattals for generations. Now they are also using the machine, and with it can make up to 1,000 pattals a day.
Since we have gotten these machines, we have profited more. These plates have a better look.
Following the ban on single-use plastics, demand for tor plants has been booming. When India was under British rule, the plant suffered for years. The colonizers planted huge commercial forests for the construction of railways and ships.
Tor is a creeper that climbs on other trees. So it would stop the growth of their commercial trees. Then it was declared a parasite and was chopped and cut until it no longer flourished.
Kulbhushan Upmanyu began to fight the commercial forests in his homeland over 40 years ago. In 1984, the movement around the environmentalist succeeded in having numerous pine and eucalyptus trees removed and replaced by traditional varieties. Shortly afterwards, the planting of pine trees near villages was banned. He is convinced that the community's efforts have contributed to the revival of the fast-growing tor. In the markets of Himachal Pradesh, pattals have increasingly established themselves as a sustainable plastic alternative. Here in Mandi, the state's commercial hub, traders say they sell at least 10,000 tor pattals every day. No wonder that many in the region hope that the use of tor will become more widespread and established.
So we have to look at how to increase its manufacturing and increase the planting of tor. People who are engaged with tor need to be given modern machines so that more pattals are manufactured. This way, Himachal will be able to be sustainable or provide for itself at least.
फिर कम से कम हिमालय के क्षेत्र की अपनी ज़रूरतें तो पूरी हों.
Until now, that's been difficult. The mountains make farming extremely hard work. But tor thrives here and even releases valuable nitrogen into the soil, making it more fertile. And the advantages don't stop there.
As it grows on slopes, it plays a very important role in curbing soil erosion. Being a vine with huge leaves, it plays an important role on sloping terrain where it slows down the wind and further reduces soil erosion.
विंड को ब्रेक करेगा और फर्दर सॉइल इरोजन से प्रोटेक्ट करेगा.
Young tall leaves are cooked by the people up here in the mountains. The seeds are eaten like pulses. The long branching twines of the plant are made into ropes. Babu Ram is happy that the leaves, which he processes and sells with his family, are now more in demand than ever.
In India, we really love frying all our food. So it's obvious that a lot of cooking oil is often discarded, which is not very good for the environment. But what if this used cooking oil could be used as fuel for our cars? Well, seems like it can be done.
Vijaya spent more than 15 years cooking in other people's restaurant kitchens before deciding to do it alone. Today, she serves up popular fast food fare in her own Chennai eatery.
Our menu centers on burgers, chicken, and other deep fried foods. So we need a daily supply of fresh oil. We buy around 30 liters a day.
Before opening hours, Vijaya prepares her menu and refreshes the cooking oil, a step she didn't always take as regularly as she does today.
We used to fry the food and throw away the oil.
Across India, restaurants and street vendors frequently reuse their cooking oil. A practice studies show produce toxins that cause inflammation, the key cause of diseases like obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. In 2019, India's food safety regulator introduced rules to curb the risks to people's health and to the environment, because the improper disposal of cooking oil chokes sewage systems and pollutes rivers, lakes, and groundwater. The agency also started the Repurpose Used Cooking Oil initiative to collect and convert used cooking oil into biodiesel.
We now pass on the oil for upcycling. We now make money on the waste.
A Tamil Nadu startup collects Vijaya's used oil and pays her 45 rupees, that is 50 cents for every litre. It's the first step in the oil's upcycling journey.
We generally provide hotels with containers to fill with the used oil. Every week or 10 to 15 days, depending on demand, we collect that oil from the hotels and bring it to our facility.
The company collects close to 100,000 litres of oil per month and brings it to processing plants such as this one. First, it is filtered to remove particulate matter. Then, the oil quality is tested and fine-tuned in the next step.
This is where we store the used cooking oil. From here, we take it to the plant, where it's heated at 70 degrees Celsius. This is a reactor. After that, it moves from settler to dryer. In the dryer again, we heat it up to 125 degrees. At that stage, solvent and moisture will be removed, and the result is clear biodiesel.
Water content, solvent, remove clear BD.
Every container of oil that isn't tipped down a drain and is turned into biodiesel can help cut the use of petroleum diesel and its harmful emissions. Vijaya has profited from the initiative and is now trying to persuade others in her industry to join in.
I have begun encouraging hotel owners to sign up. I explain to them how it works and why it's a good idea to provide their waste oil. Through this, we can help the environment.
From the deep fryer of Vijaya's restaurant kitchen into a cleaner fuel to power vehicles, upcycled cooking oil is making inroads here in Tamil Nadu.
My entire family would think that I'm an adult in the true sense, the day I get married or the day I buy my own house. Well, that's how important buying one's own house is, at least here in India for us. But like I said at the start of the show, all our choices have consequences. So what are the consequences of this life-changing decision, and what other alternates do we have?
Before we jump in, what is a single-family house? Generally speaking, we're talking about a detached house on its own piece of land that doesn't share walls, utilities, or entrances with any other residences. In the US, the post-World War II period made the house with a yard and a white picket fence an attainable middle-class fantasy. Millions of veterans had come home from the war, and the government guaranteed generous loans for white families to settle into newly constructed houses outside city centers.
Almost overnight, suburbia was born. 500,000 homes sprang up around the country in 1946, nearly 1 million in 1947.
But wait, a housing boom for whom? The government guaranteed generous loans for white families. It was white families who settled in the suburbs, which led other white families to also leave city centers.
Some of that anti-urban kind of instinct was actually tied to the tail end of the Great Migration and the movement of African Americans from the South into central cities.
This is Dr. Harley Etienne, a professor of urban planning.
Underneath all of this, this is all sitting on a bedrock of the unspoken racism of not wanting to move to the center of cities. That created a really particular vicious cycle of disinvestment in cities, but then, investment in suburbs and the expansion of the suburbs.
This exodus of white people into suburbs was eventually dubbed white flight. And since public services are largely funded through property taxes, it deprived inner-city communities of funding and social services. Elsewhere, the end of the Second World War marked independence from many countries in the global South. And a lot of those places modernized their cities based on Western examples. Even in places like Thailand, which wasn't directly colonized, the West was still a benchmark for aspiration.
In modern cities, nowadays, I observed that the pattern and also the design of middle-class house is adapted from Western culture.
Amada Jantarangse is a sociologist whose research focuses on housing in Thailand.
Like modern house or English-style house, which show their luxury status and higher status.
And thus the single-family house became a global trademark for wealth and belonging. Of the 140 million housing units in the United States, roughly 85 million are single-family homes. In Croatia, almost 70% of the population lives in detached houses, the highest percentage in Europe. These numbers are terrifying for the planet. Construction alone emits tons of CO2, from the raw materials themselves to the transport, as well as energy needed on site. Studies have shown that building a single-family house emits roughly 385 kilos of CO2 per square meter, not to mention the carbon footprint of all the things you need to put in the house, and the equipment to maintain the lawn, the garden, the landscaping, and the driveway. Did you know that a lawnmower emits as much emissions as a car? But really, the list of damage goes on. Reduction of arable land and biodiversity because of land use, and worst of all, social inequality.
Does it make sense for a single person to live in 5,000 square feet when so many people live on, so much less? You think about kind of dense housing in Manila or Hong Kong, Dhaka, Bangladesh.
So why is it so hard to change the status quo? Well, for starters, housing is deeply political. Zoning is the set of laws in urban planning that dictate how land can be used and what can be built where. And who makes those laws? Politicians. In many American cities, it's actually illegal to build anything other than single-family homes in certain places. In San Jose, California, for example, 94% of residential land is zoned for single-family houses. In Los Angeles, it's 75%. Almost half of Jakarta is still zoned for low-rise buildings, the majority of which are single-family homes. Most of Bangkok was zoned in a way that pushed housing to the outskirts of the city. In the US, the government and banks shaped cities by excluding non-white populations from mortgages in a practice called redlining, which persists to this day.
Redlining basically says, well, we'll guarantee mortgages in certain areas based on who's there. Basically, if the area is predominantly African American, then we're going to rate this neighborhood, we're going to downgrade it and consider it red and not guarantee mortgages here. But then in others where the population was predominantly white, they would guarantee the mortgages.
Similar exclusionary zoning already existed in cities like Johannesburg, Dhaka, and Jakarta as legacies of colonialism, creating slums and siloed neighborhoods. Bad zoning often creates housing scarcity, which today is pushing city rents to unaffordable rates all over the world. So fixing zoning laws would be a huge step towards more equitable housing. Minneapolis, Minnesota got rid of single-family zoning in 2018, for example, and San Francisco is also planning on it. But we can't just blame zoning full stop. A lot of planners say what's needed is to build out the missing middle. This means other types of single-family housing structures like duplexes and townhouses that support walkable communities with local retail and public transportation. As every planner will tell you, housing is about so much more than just houses. It's about improving public transportation, investing in schools, and developing underused urban areas to increase density. We also have to examine our consumerism and actually confront systems of oppression that sustain the interests of those in power at the cost of the marginalized.
If you could take social difference and injustice out of the equation, it would be a lot easier to reach consensus on what we have to do.
The city-state of Singapore, which was a British colony for 144 years, is often touted as the golden child of urban planning. Over 80% of the population lives in mostly vertical public housing, with decentralized neighborhoods designed for pedestrians and supported by mass transit. If you want to buy a car, you'll have to pay some huge taxes, so that discourages auto ownership. But Singapore is a small city-state island. The government owns 90% of its land, and all these measures happened because of rigid state regulation. Every place has its own particular history, culture, geography, and demographics, so what makes a good house is a really relative definition, and one that's always evolving.
The clothes that we wear are yet another choice that we make with a big carbon footprint. A whopping 10% of the total global carbon emissions come from the fashion industry. Where is the fabric grown? How is it grown? Who is making these clothes? These are all concerns that a fashion brand in Indonesia is trying to address.
We're a social enterprise that works to end the exploitation of women in villages across Indonesia while taking care of our environment. My name is Danica and I'm the founder and CEO of Sukacita. Not only do we want to change how clothes are made, we actually want to change also how it's being grown. Everything is really digital. We use social media and website in order to reach consumers on a global level, really. It's about clearly and simplifying the process such that people can get sort of an emotional attachment as well to the process behind clothes. Away from all these chemicals, away from this deep healing that really hurt our environment, to actually healing the planet. My background actually has nothing to do about fashion. I'm a development economist, and my work took me through villages across Indonesia. And there, for the first time, I saw how our clothes are made by women with their hands. When I was in the villages, I started realizing that there are women whose lives are impacted by our everyday choice of what we wear. And I realized that I wanted to then build a bridge between people all around the world who care about these issues, who care about where their clothes come from, with the very women who actually make it, the very women who grew the plants that are used to make the clothes. Everything we make, all the colors, is actually made of plants, of indigenous Indonesian knowledge, that has existed through generations, but is lost in the pursuit of lowering the cost of fashion. We have to really work very hard to make sure there is enough awareness and therefore demand for all these products basically. And we're actually very happy because we managed to ship our e-boost products to now over 30 countries, and that managed to sustain all the field work that we do on the villages level. We're not another fashion brand, we're not another business, but we're a model for change. We're here to show that there is a different way, that you as a business can grow, you can be successful, but at the same time also making sure that every choice literally empowers those who previously didn't have a choice. We've managed to, in these past 6 years, build one of the world's first farm-to-closet fashion supply chains. And our hope is actually to really significantly scale this. So our goal is that within the next 5 years, we want to scale that to 1,000 hectares.
Catching a flight is, of course, a carbon-intensive activity. But there is a French inventor who is using solar panels to make this more sustainable.
It's my dream to travel as far as I want without polluting our planet. And I feel like we're on our way there. It's wonderful.
Jean-Baptiste Loiselet has been in the air for 5 hours and he's covered 220 kilometers. Loiselet is on the 15th leg of his airborne Tour de France. He's landing in Groyer in the south of the country. The tour is intended to promote his project Wings for the Planet.
What a flight.
The adventurer and engineer quit his job to focus exclusively on his solar-powered glider. Wherever he goes, his invention draws curious onlookers who want to know how it works.
My glider takes off on its own with this propeller. It may seem small, but it's a meter across in diameter. It's powered by batteries, and they're charged by the solar cells on the wings.
Loiselet spent 3 years working on the glider and put all his savings into the prototype.
I'm impressed. It's very smooth. He completely integrated the solar cells into the wings.
I'm an engineer and pilot, and I have an idea how much work went into this. It's fantastic, and it makes you dream. Dream of climate-friendly flight without emitting a single gram of CO2.
It's already happening. See, it can fly.
He's preparing for the next leg of the tour.
Either I'll fly to Montpellier, to Pic-Saint-Loup, or over Florac.
The engineer loves nature and technology. He used to work designing underwater robots. Once, near the South Pole, he watched a young albatross in flight.
Albatrosses in flight are fabulous. They inspired me. I said I wanted to fly like them one day.
Many in the aeronautics industry think he's nuts. Loiselet is convinced even jumbo jets will one day fly powered by the sun alone, emission-free.
Of course it's hard to imagine a Boeing or Airbus with solar cells. But modern photovoltaic cells harness just 20% of the energy. In 10 to 20 years, it might be 40 or 60%. Planes might be traveling at just 400 kilometers an hour instead of 800, but that's enough for domestic flights.
During takeoff in Groyer, Loiselet demonstrates his invention. Conventional gliders need a winch or a motorized plane to start and a lot of energy. But Loiselet makes it up into the air on his own.
Bye bye, Groyer. My Tour de France is almost over.
Fin du voyage. The aviation pioneer is already planning his tour of Europe to get even more people on board with the dream of flying with the power of the sun.
If we could put a little more thought into what we do and consciously pick and choose sustainable alternatives, we will realize that plenty of them are available and that we could truly make a difference. But you let me know what was your takeaway from today's episode. You can email us or reach out to me directly on my Twitter. I will see you next week. Until then, take care, goodbye, namaskar.